Well, I don't know if you've come across someone who doesn't have a view on the arrest of the former President Jacob Zuma. I do think almost everybody does. Now, you would have heard today he should be eligible for parole in 4 months or so, 3 months and 22 days. The former president ordered to spend 15 months in prison for defying the constitutional court order that he must answer questions under oath at the Zondo Commission. Well, the leader of the United Democratic Movement is Bantu Holomisa. I describe him as the leader of a political party, but you know the immense role that he's played in our country over many, many years. General Holomisa, good afternoon to you, sir. How are you feeling about this? Is it a victory for the rule of law and the Constitution? Is it an unfair punishment? Is it justice? How do you feel?
Good afternoon, Steve, and our viewers. The United Democratic Movement welcomes this decision by the President. Indeed, we should commend him for surrendering to the police without incident, given the noise which was coming from some people around him. But we should take our heads off. In fact, this reminded me of the incident of Chief George Matanzima, the former Prime Minister of the then Transkei government, who was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment by the Chief Justice of Transkei then. Although the soldiers were fighting corruption, but when the moment arrived for him to be arrested and sent to jail, we did have some thoughts and sympathies because we are human beings. But he served only 3 years, and then he was released because of health reasons. So the arrest the arrest of Msholos then should send shivers down the spines of the other members of the African National Congress who are in government, who have abused their offices. However, the entire President Zuma saga has been a lesson in our constitution, as well as our court system and its correctness. Of course, the whole country is interested in Monday's proceedings, as we are yet again in uncharted waters, as the Concord will hear President's plea on its judgment. The crux of the whole argument, I guess, will center around procedural issues. That is, if a case went straight to the Constitutional Court without being ventilated at a lower court, the question is, where should the accused appeal if he or she is not satisfied with the judgment? So it's going to be an interesting argument on Monday. I'm looking forward to it.
So we have that. We have, the parole application probably coming in 3 months and 22 days. But above all of that, it really is the greatest symbol around the Constitution. And I mean, this, I suppose, is the big issue. I mean, I don't know if you ever thought that a former president would ever go to jail in democratic South Africa. I don't think anyone really thought about it. And yet, it's suddenly become quite important. I mean, there's no way to deny that last night was an important moment.
No, we are not questioning that. I'm one of the people who accepted the judgment of the Constitutional Court. But when the Constitutional Court agreed to listen to this case again, what came to my mind is that, I always thought the decision of the Court is not appealable, it's not reviewable. That's why I'm interested in Monday's case.
It's also, I mean, you talk about the history of this, and I mean, there's big, and what happened in Transkei with Prime Minister Matanzima. I mean, there's so many resonances with that. But both of them really boil down to what happens in the final moments. And I suppose you could argue that's the real test of a person, in a way, when the chips are down, when the only option perhaps is violence of some kind. It's quite important that that doesn't happen, and that didn't happen last night. We didn't have violence last night.
Yes, we were not there, but I can imagine what was taking place in the mind of those bodyguards who were always with Msholos, let alone his family, and even some commissioners of police, senior policemen who were there, that, by the way, I'm this general because I was promoted by this president I'm arresting today. So those moments, they do come. But law is law. Rules are rules, unfortunately.
I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, there's a bigger conversation. So people talk about what happened during the Zuma presidency. You were in Parliament. We know your views on what happened there, the corruption that we saw. I mean, I should say alleged because there have been so few convictions, but we've seen the testimony at the Zondo Commission. But making South Africa a proper constitutional democracy is not something that happens in one night. I don't think it's something that even happens in 30 years. What do we need to do now to build on what's happened, to make sure that everyone is treated equally before the law, no matter who they are? In other words, what's the next thing for South Africa?
If we can arrest a person who was a president of South Africa, I don't think now the police, the NPA, the Hawks, should have any fear in doing their job. Lots of people have stolen the money. You will find that lots of ministers, ex-ministers, DGs, ex-DGs, chief directors, were responsible for opening the doors for these hyenas to come into South Africa, or even those who are here in South Africa. So we need to make sure that our law enforcement agencies are independent. They must not look at fairly, oh, let's wait what the minister says. If a crime has been committed, they must act.
It's also about the enablers. You talk about the people who open the door to the hyenas. There's a lot about how people try to blow the whistle on corruption during that time. And, I mean, some people suffered greatly for it. The people didn't just lose their jobs. They suffered in other ways. Things happened to them. It's about trying to make sure that that never happens. And I suppose it's about building the National Prosecuting Authority and building the criminal justice system at the same time.
I fully agree with you on that. I've been helped in exposing a number of corrupt cases, and I've succeeded in a number of them. And when they are, those people who are whistleblowers are detected, they are always targeted, notwithstanding the fact that there is a legislation which purports to protect those whistleblowers. But if the system is not correct, we need to scan now. What kind of a person must serve at NPA level? What kind of a person must serve as a Hawks in the Hawks department, SIU, etc., etc.? But this is a lesson.
General Bantu Holomisa, I do appreciate the time, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Leader of the United Democratic Movement there, giving his view on the events of the last 24 hours.